to this topic, which, as you know, is an all-important one, incredibly important in our culture, and more obviously for men than for women, as we will go into as we go along. So we live in a culture where, and by the way, I did a workshop on sex, which I called Whatever Became of Sex, Black, White, and Shades of Grey. In that, I was describing both the ways in which sex is profoundly fallen and broken in our world and the incredible pain that it causes, but also the other side of it, that sex is an incredibly good and wonderful gift from God. And the stark reality is that porn is the misuse and abuse of that good gift. And that is a poison to our system, a poison to our brains, a poison to our relationships, a poison to every aspect of our being. And for many of us who are hooked on it, feel enormous shame and anger with ourselves. And we feel that we can't break free, that it's impossible. And we may also feel anger with God, that He hasn't helped us to break free. It's a powerful force in our lives. So we know that sex is designed to give us great pleasure. So it's a natural and good God-given desire, a legitimate longing for this sense of pleasure, orgasm, consummation that we all want to have. But it's the context in which we have that is so important, isn't it? Because it's not just about the raw biology of sexual orgasm. You are familiar, and I'll go through this pretty quickly, but the problem is vast in that it's a matter of billions of dollars each year. Pamela Paul, about 10 years ago, wrote this book, Pornified, How Pornography is Transforming Our Lives, Our Relationships, and Our Families. And China and South Korea and Japan are ahead of the US by quite a long way in the production of pornography nowadays. But 10 years ago or so in Hollywood, they were producing about 400 regular movies a year. Just down the road in Los Angeles warehouse, about 11,000 pornographic movies were being produced. And people say that about every 39 minutes in the United States, a new porno movie is produced. Well, the trade has been undercut somewhat by the fact that so many people nowadays are making their own home porno movies and camming, sending it out from their webcams, so that people aren't going so much for the more expensive pornography. They're webcamming, they're sexting, but it is a huge part of the web traffic, the internet, that we all live in these days. And typically we hear about it's such a problem because it's so easily accessible, it's so anonymous, and it is so affordable. And someone else has added, it's so accidental in many teenagers' lives. They just come across it, and it is out to get them. It is out to get you, to get past your defenses on your computer in whatever way it can. In the United States, when kids go online to do research for school and they put in White House, it goes straight to a porn site. And there are many others like that, at least it used to. They've probably changed that now. So the average visit to a news site is about 3 to 6 minutes on the internet. I'm told that to a porn site for X-rated videos, it's about 20 minutes is the average time. Amongst college-age men, 14% did not use pornography in the last year. So some people don't use it. And in a sense, you can live without it. That's the point of this, in a sense. But as you can see, 17% once a month or less, 48% 4 to 6 days a month, 16% 3 to 5 days a week, 5% every day or nearly every day. And 67% of young men and 49% of young women say that viewing porn is an acceptable way to express one's sexuality. So it's widely and increasingly accepted, and if you regard it as something abnormal, then you are seen as somewhat weird in our culture. And amongst churches, pastors and congregations, Rick Warren did research back again about 10 years ago of nearly 1,500 pastors, and 54% of them admitted viewing porn in the last year, 30% of them in the last month. And then he went to the congregation, he did look at his congregation and found some pretty staggering statistics of the amount of porn use. But in another evangelical denominational survey in 2005 of just over 1,000 male church members, 39% out of all the men had accessed internet porn more than 25 times. I think this was in the last year. And out of the 19 to 29-year-olds, 60% had. So the younger, more internet savvy you are, the more you've grown up with it, the more likely you are to use porn. Now, mind you, all these statistics are in the United States. They change, and so they're approximate statistics. If you go to the noporn.com site, you'll find these statistics from a few years ago. Out of 40,000 people who said they were, 3/4 of them said they were religious, 75% said they were addicted to porn. Now, the word addiction is used pretty loosely here. This is where you have a problem with it, you're struggling with it. Technically, in the addiction world, the experts say it's about 8% of men and 3% of women who are seriously addicted to porn. Above that, it's you're on the slippery slope towards a really severe addiction. 62% had not told anyone, so it's certainly a secret thing. 52% said they view porn daily. 42% were age 11 to 15 when they were first hooked. 25% were 16 to 20 when they were first hooked on it, and 10% under the age of 10. Now that last one is pretty disturbing, isn't it? And this is where so many school kids are discovering it accidentally and then getting on into it. In Generation Sext, as it's sometimes called, 93% of boys, 62% of girls were exposed to internet porn before the age of 18. 83% of boys, 57% of girls aged 11 to 17 have seen group sex on the internet. Slightly lesser numbers have seen porn showing same-sex intercourse, and then about half that number in both boys and girls have viewed bestiality on the internet. So where are young people getting their sex education? Where are they learning about what it means to be a man or to be a woman, or how to treat women? Most of them are learning it on the internet through pornography, unless parents and you, pastors, youth teachers, youth workers and leaders are giving them some alternative perspective. But this is a terrible place to learn about those things because it's so full of lies. So if we look at the characteristics, what is it that draws people? Why is it so seductive? It's pleasurable, isn't it? It gives you your fix. It gives you your rush, your orgasm. And let's face it, real relationships are difficult, aren't they? I mean, those of you who are married know that you can't just make love whenever you want to, because there are two of you involved, and the other person, your wife, may not want to. I know I'm speaking to an audience of all but one men here, and you have to work at your relationship, and sometimes it's not available to you to have sex because the other person's tired and is maybe sick, maybe looking after children at night, and all that sort of thing. So fantasy is a lot easier than reality, where you get a sort of release without responsibility. You can have it whenever you want it, and in whatever form, and with whoever. Sorry, let me go back there again. With whoever you want it. Pamela Paul, in her book, talks about the beauty of pornography. She says, the beauty of pornography is that there are never any hiccups in courtship. Nobody fails to get an erection. The woman doesn't have trouble achieving orgasm. Nobody fears their gut looks too big, or they're sweating too much, or they can't catch their breath. In pornography, no one needs to make pillow talk. There's no expectation that a man will tell a woman that he loves her, or get up and make breakfast. Nobody gets genital warts, or heaven forbid, the AIDS virus. Nobody gets pregnant, or wants to get married, or tries to pin down a date for the next weekend. So it's a fantasy world where there aren't any complications. So much easier to live with that. And many young men and some young women have learned to channel their emotional tension. It's mood, it's brain altering. This is the addictive nature of orgasm. You get tired, you get bored, you get lonely, you get anxious, angry, and you medicate yourself with masturbation. And then you add in the pornography maybe when you get a little bit older. And this changes the brain. It gives you a rush of dopamine. It produces other chemicals in the brain, structural brain changes. And eventually you need more and more. So this is the true addiction, where you develop a tolerance and you need more bizarre, more erotic, more strange images to turn you on and give you the same arousal. So you have cravings for more. And it is a making love to yourself, in a sense, isn't it? So the pleasure pathways, and the neuroscientists see the changes in the brain. As one person puts it, it's like, the steady drip, drip that creates a groove in the ground, eventually after thousands of years becomes a Grand Canyon. So if you keep putting pornography into your brain, drip, 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 it creates a pathway which is very difficult to get out of again. You have a channel there, neurochemicals that have changed in your brain. And it's interesting that the bonding chemical, one of the bonding chemicals, prolactin and oxytocin and so on, they discovered that it is less of that is released during masturbation than it is during sexual intercourse between two people. Now, guys who keep using pornography, we caricature their brains, they begin to look like this. But this is sort of what it feels like, that this is all you can think about. This is all that you're obsessed with. This is all that you go in pursuit of. Now, there's a danger of caricaturing, obviously, in this, but there is some truth in it. Now, why men more than women? It's partly that we men do tend to think about sex more than women. We tend to fantasize about sex more than women. We tend to want to go straight for orgasm rather than just the cuddling and the holding. We tend to separate sex and relationship more easily. Again, there's a danger of caricaturing here, because there are some women who are more like men in their desires. But I think that we men tend to confuse love and lust more easily. Now, women traditionally we say they tend to get addicted to the romance novels, and there's a huge trade. It's billions of dollars, again, for women of romance novels. And it's true that women do tend to want what we call erotica, which involves a storyline and relationships, rather than just the raw sexual act to which to masturbate. So the visitors to porn sites are about 72% male, 28% female. 31% of women between the age of 18 and 26, so it's going up, use porn, and there is a shift now of the under 30s tend to be more interested in the sort of porn that men are interested in. And 17% of all women confess to struggle with porn, whereas we estimate that somewhere between a 50 and 100% of men struggle with porn. And we're all have sexual desire, we're all tempted. In the seminary, there are many men who are really struggling with porn. But in the female porn, there is tends to be more romance, more relationship, what we call erotica. There's more, this is a way to educate myself about what men want. And some of them say we do it because we want equal opportunity and empowerment. If the men are doing it, why shouldn't we? Shades of Grey is a bestseller, 100 million copies, 52 languages it's translated into, and it's a book about sexual fantasy. It's a fantasy person, it's a fantasy sex life, it's a fantasy lifestyle, and it takes you away from, that sort of fantasy takes you away from reality. Now, I think a biblical imagination can still use imagination. I prefer it to call it biblical imagination rather than fantasy, like the Song of Solomon. It is imagination about two people having a pretty erotic time together. A wonderfully erotic book that says sex is good, and both men and women desire it, and both men and women think about it and want it, and imagine different parts of the body, and so on. So this book is a phenomenon. It also introduced the whole phenomenon of BDSM, of bondage and sadomasochism and domination, and basically educating people and saying this is what your sex lives can be. That you can be spiced up in these ways by having your red room of pain and by using whips and ropes and chains and all the other things, as long as there is consent. There is a certain redemptive aspect in that book, by the way, in that the hero, the fantasy hero, actually turns out to be a guy who's incredibly sexually damaged by sexual abuse, and the woman he has the relationship with, they eventually get married and have a family. So he's rescued from his pain and his sexual addiction life by this woman. So I think I've said most of these things here. I think in women there is more shame and splitting, and men can be called, it can be admired for being very sexy. They're the stud, they're the player, whereas if women are into a lot of pornography and so on, they're often regarded as a whore or a slut or a tramp. There's more shame attached to that. And for women, there are many more consequences in terms of pregnancy and STD and post-abortion trauma and so on, and depression and anxiety. So sexual addiction is where there is craving, no control, and you continue despite the damaging consequences to your life. So the basic themes in pornography are pretty grim, that all women at all times want sex from men. It's not just about nice sex between two people who love each other. Many of these women who act out the porn movies have to take drugs and alcohol to do the things that they do every day. The theme is that women like all the sexual acts that men perform or demand, and any woman who doesn't can be turned with a little force to like it. So it's very demeaning to women, and in a sense demeaning and dehumanizing to men, although they don't realize that. So the progression is often one of this tolerance, anything goes. You need more stimulation, so it's homosexual, it's bisexual, it's group sex, it's sex with animals, it's sex with machines, anything. And then you begin to get withdrawal symptoms, so you want it all day, every day. You spend more and more time on the internet, maybe spend money going to sex clubs, strip bars, and so on. You become more and more desensitized to what's normal, and more involved in deceiving yourself, denying what you're into, and you become more dissatisfied and bored. Why is Viagra such a big drug these days? I think it's partly because people are bored with sex. They've had too much and they need a chemical to give them an erection. So it makes people see the world through porn-tinted spectacles, an exaggerated perception of sexual activity in society, a belief that promiscuity is the natural state, a cynicism about love or the need for affection between sexual partners, devaluation of women, a sense of sort of false intimacy that you have with this screen virtual character. You become more narcissistic and callous in the real relationships you have, and there's a lack of commitment to marriage and family. So you can see where this is going. You have to become more and more secret, more compartmentalized. A number of the seminary students, brilliant preachers, and yet horribly addicted to pornography. Pastors, you live a double life. Pastors are very good at developing compartments in your life. Addictions on the one side, and seen as a saint and a wonderful preacher and pastor on the other. And what does that lead to, of course? A huge amount of self-loathing and shame. No one would love me as I am. Sex and relationship are my most important need. These sorts of lies that you come to begin to believe. So in the typical sort of addiction cycle, it's a compulsive one. You get unhappy, dissatisfied in your work, bored, depressed. You find a way to meet your needs, to feel good, and this might be with alcohol, drugs, sex, and you become increasingly preoccupied with that. You have the ritual of finding the right images on the internet or going to the certain part of the city, getting your fix, and then feeling incredible shame and guilt, resolving to never do it again. And then because you're feeling so guilty and ashamed, the next time you feel anxious and you're trying to resist, you fall prey again, and so the cycle goes round. So shame, marriage problems, obviously distance from God, all of these are the slippery slope that you're into when you are in the grip, basically, of pornography. Now that's looking at the downside, and in the second half here, after some discussion, we're going to look at how to begin to break its hold.